Sorry for that. I've been joking that that's my secretary in the background on every Zoom meeting during the pandemic.
Welcome to the 3 O'Clock Coffee Podcast, a place where extraordinary people network together to share meaningful stories that inspire others. Do you have a great story you would like to share with the world? If so, go to 3o'clockcoffee.com and sign up today to be on our show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and tell a friend about the 3 O'Clock Coffee Podcast.
Well, welcome to another episode of 3 O'Clock Coffee. And yes, it is that time for another great cup of coffee, but not only a great cup of coffee, to meet another extraordinary person. And I'd like to introduce you to Bill Gates. No, Kaitz, as Bill says. Bill used to be a salesperson. He used to say, "My name is Bill Gates," with a K. And I just absolutely love it. How could you not forget Bill's name? Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, before we start, I'm buying coffee. What kind of coffee would you like?
I like just plain old drip coffee with sugar and just let the cream look at the coffee. That's it. Just a dash.
Let the cream look at the coffee.
That's it. No more.
I like that. Well, Bill and I are from Boston. Bill originally grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, and I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And if Bill knows Lawrence, I'm a tough boy because Lawrence was the place, right, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time there, but it's probably a little bit in the same line of what I grew up in, for sure.
Yeah, maybe we had friends that grew up with Whitey Bulger too, but that's another story. We'll save that for another podcast, right?
It's a completely different podcast, yes.
Bill, I'd like to introduce people of how we met and why you are such an extraordinary individual. Bill and I met in Arizona, a nice balmy 90-degree day, I believe.
Yeah. It was a nice cool evening for Arizona at a Genius Network, if I remember correctly, right? The
Genius Network by Joe Polish. If you know Joe Polish, geniusnetwork.com. Joe Polish is an amazing dude. He connects people with like Richard Branson and Tony Robbins and this one and Scott and Bill, and we're all like good friends. And that's what Joe Polish does. So when you go to Genius Network, you meet extraordinary people. And I met Bill. So Bill and I are sitting down at the table, and Bill is like, I didn't tell Bill what we're going to talk about at coffee, but this is what we talk about at coffee. We just talk stuff, right? And we were having a cup of coffee. And Bill, I don't think I could describe the story as well as you do, but you're like a cat. You have 9 lives, dude. You like I was that morning. I was complaining because I don't know, my shirt didn't fit well, or I'm like, oh, it's too hot, I'm sweating, and I'm like cranky or something so small. And then I sit down and have coffee with you, and you tell me your story. And again, we just met, we're having coffee. You say, "Hi, my name's Bill." I say, "Hi, my name is Scott." And then we get into this conversation. Take it away, Bill.
Yeah, well, I have some very visible scars all over my face and neck. And my wife and I just moved to Fort Lauderdale in 2009, and just hanging out at a bar right on A1A, trying to get to know people in the environment. I was attacked at random by some, crazy drug addict that wanted to go back to prison, and got something in the neighborhood of like 600-700 stitches. Came within an inch of my life, and that was day one. I just moved the day before to Fort Lauderdale, and coming out of that was interesting. I had a business venture that we had just started. There was a reason we moved to Fort Lauderdale. It obviously got put on pause while I healed. And by the time I was healed and ready to go, that business venture that opportunity had passed. So I had to start a whole new one, which landed me into what I'm doing now, but completely, totally random act of violence. But it kind of gave me a new perspective on things. when you've literally stared death in the face, it kind of turns down the volume on the other noise in life, if you will.
Yeah, all that little stuff that we might complain about. When you think of your story, you're like, wow, I'm just grateful to be here today.
Super grateful to be here, and that these little chains of events have always been really interesting to me, because had I gone into that business venture failed miserably for those involved. And because I had found myself stuck in a place that I didn't have any contacts, I took the first job I could find off of Craigslist. And that first job I could find off of Craigslist was a sales job, because it's what I knew. And the owner of that company was in a field that I had a lot of experience in, which is what I'm in now, helping companies raise capital. So I went to work for the owner of that company's father, who sent me traveling across the country, which introduced me to some very powerful relationships that I still nurture to this day, 12, 13 years later, that set me on the path to success. So if it wasn't for that tragedy, I wouldn't have been forced to the path that I've nurtured and really enjoyed since.
I read about that so many times. I'm into reading. I read books. I'm really intrigued by CEOs and big companies, and try to figure out how they got there. And most I find out was because of a tragedy that changed their lives, that brought them to where they are today. So that's what when you told me your story, I'm like, dude, this guy's got it. My money's on him. My money is on him. And I knew it. And I gave you some suggestions about joining some other programs, because you just had it. You were coachable, you were driven, and you were going to make it happen.
It was your suggestion that I walked right away from you and joined Strategic Coach. When you told me your story, and I heard your success and everything that Coach had done for you, I ran immediately to the booth and signed up. And that program changed my life. People like yourself and sharing your experiences have helped me. And pulling it back to tragedy, so that business venture was me as a solopreneur, as a consultant, and it worked really well. I had a pretty healthy income, but it was in 2016 when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma that I then got scared, because I'm the sole breadwinner. I'm the only person that made the bread, right? The head cook and chief bottle washer at my, and I'm doing air quotes, business. And I realized I didn't have a business. I had a skill. I created a job for myself. And getting through Hodgkin's lymphoma, I'm clear. If I could make it to January without a recurrence, then they say it's 99.9% will never come back. But that second kind of brush with death, if you will, 2 out of my 9 lives, kind of taught me or showed me that I really need to take my skill and turn it into a business, even though I thought it was never possible. I had this fear, and the fear that I had was, Dan Sullivan would probably call it 1 + 1 = 1/2, is what I was thinking at the time, not realizing that if I brought on a team and taught them what I knew, that 1 + 1 would actually equal 3, which is a Dan Sullivan quote. And so I was sitting on the back porch. I've been cleared from chemo and radiation, and I remember this moment that just kind of like washed over me. And I thought, no matter what happens, I'll be fine. Like, I've picked myself up and dusted myself more times than I can count. And as long as you're taking in air, you're always going to be okay. We always have this fear of failure, or fear of, losing what you currently have. And what winds up happening is hanging on to that fear is exactly the one thing that keeps you from getting everything that you want. So just, kind of like when you're diving off a cliff, if you trip, you're going to fall and land on the rocks. But if you just kind of take that leap out there and free fall, you're going to land safely in the water. And that moment, I still hang on to it. It sticks with me. It was a strong feeling of just saying there's really no way to fail if you just commit to doing it and you let go of the fear.
Yeah, I love metaphors, and I know you use that as a metaphor for fear, and it's a great metaphor. And you're absolutely right. Is most people are afraid to change jobs because they don't know what's going to happen. Will that be worse than what I have? Maybe I should just stay here. And it's that fear. And so many people live in fear, not as they're scared and they're shaken, but in their minds. That's the great thing about when I started to meet people at 3 o'clock coffee, back in the old days, 13 months ago, um, back in the old days, when we didn't have virtual and I had to jump on a plane to meet somebody for 3 o'clock coffee, which I really do enjoy and I still enjoy today. But I would meet people that would give me that one thing. And right now I'm hearing from you is fear is not an option.
I think that would be true. That's how I've looked at everything recently. And fear isn't necessarily an option. We should always be a little afraid. And I think paralyzing fear is not an option. I think if you're not a little scared in business ever, then your future has to scare you a little bit, right? I think.
All right, agreed. You just got to go a little bit out of the comfort zone. You're like, but that's the adrenaline that we love. That's part of being an entrepreneur because we don't like stagnance. We don't like the same thing every day. We are individuals that creativity doesn't happen between the hours of 9 and 5.
Yeah, we don't keep hours. Yeah, exactly. I think fear that keeps you from forward progress is what we need to avoid. I think in any stage of my life, and I think this is what brought us or got me invited onto the podcast, was that concept Dan talks about of the gap and the gain. And when you wind up in the gap, and I guess it might be a little bit above a lot of people's experience on this thing, but when you wind up in a situation where you're unhappy with your progress and you feel like you're stagnant, because you're chasing a horizon
that you could never get to. You can never get to the horizon. Yeah, we see it.
I always wind up welcoming.
Can't get there.
Yeah, you can never get to. Yeah, you can never get to. Yep. Whenever I fall into those sullen moments where you feel, like this isn't working, or you feel down on it, or you're afraid that this isn't going to work, I always embrace those moments. I let myself feel it. I work through it, and then I look back on it, and I realize coming out of it that this is the moment right before greatness, right before you figure out the solution. You can't run through life thinking that you're magically going to have all the answers at the right times. You're going to ride that emotional roller coaster, and you're going to feel fear, and you're going to feel angry, you're going to feel upset, you're going to feel joy, you're going to feel all of it. But if you let yourself feel it and you realize that this is one step forward in the right direction, anytime that I've felt like I'm not making any progress, I realize it's because I'm getting ready to break through another ceiling.
Oh yeah, totally agree with that. And and for the listeners, if you actually rewind that and listen to what Bill just said, it's so relevant. It's incredible how relevant that really is. And it's this ceiling of busting through and getting to the next level. It's just, I'm a visual guy, so I can actually visually see me going like through the white ceiling above the roof and just, going right above it. So, hey, what you think? I know I love Joe Polish. I love Genius Network. I learned something that I didn't expect to learn when I was at Genius Network. And when I talk to somebody like yourself, people talk to somebody like me, we are very grateful. We realize that, I have this quote, the harder I work, the luckier I get, right? The harder I work, the luckier I get. And when we were at Genius Network, we were with, 1,000 people more, right? And I won't mention any names, but we are with some rock star, superstar CEOs of companies that if you were listening to, we were probably with those CEOs. And what I found out is that when you listen to some of these CEOs, they were miserable. Maybe not today, but at some point in their life, they were miserable. Some try to commit suicide. Some are, they were addicts. They had 4 wives, kids they didn't talk to. And now they're very, what people would call extremely successful in business of launching a $500 million, literally $1 billion business. And they were on stage saying, I try to commit suicide. I've had an addiction problem. I've had this. That's called post-pandemic and pre-pandemic. Like at one time that would have been like, dude, what are you doing? You're at home? And now it's like, yeah, of course you're at home. It's called the pandemic and I have dogs. So we're all kind of used to it now. It's set to stone. Like it's normal now. That's normal. Not to switch the subjects here, but many years ago, I'd be on the phone with HBO or Time Inc. And I was working out of my home, or maybe my garage at the point, and my dog would bark. And I'd be like, oh, ooh. And I'd say, oh, I'm just working from home today. Like I was embarrassed about it, right? And today it's like, of course we're working from home. Yeah. Anyways, going back to CEOs and people not feeling great and positive, but they came through it. And here's the one thing that I learned. They were a little bit, how should I say it? Legacy CEOs. I don't want to say older. Legacy CEOs, where at the time they didn't have mentors, business coach programs, Genius Network, Dan Sullivan's to call of the world to keep our mind focused and, have gratitude and be grateful for what we have. And you go back 25, 30 years ago, they struggled with that and they couldn't talk to anybody. And even talking to a therapist was like, taboo. Like you didn't tell anybody. And these CEOs couldn't talk to their employees, what we call now team members, because that would be like, you're the boss. You couldn't talk. And what we're going to see over the years is these mentors, these coaches, people like you coming out that are grateful, that see life in a different point of view, that are really successful. I'm really happy to be living in the now.
You know what got me at that Genius Network annual event? And there was a concept written about by Napoleon Hill in a book he wrote about persuasion. He tells a story about how his son was born deaf, and he noticed him clamping down on those old gramophones because he could feel the vibrations and then communicate. But what he learned from this is that through this experience of talking to his son by speaking at the base of his skull and feeling vibrations and a number of nonverbal communications, that brainwaves transmit over the ether the same way that radio waves or internet or communications satellites can communicate through the ether. And when you sit in that room of all of these people who have overcome their own tragedies, who've overcome their own fears, who've accomplished so much and shared so much, it was the energy in that room that got me, that kept me going back to Genius, is that kind of, not the woo-woo energy that I'm talking about, but just when you are in a room full of like-minded individuals that are willing to share their experiences just for the sake of being able to help without having a handout in the process. Just me and you talking over coffee at Genius Network in the morning, sharing our experiences, our life, and just any advice you could give me, because I was just exacerbated at trying to turn my skill into a business. And you said, well, I got just the thing for you. Here it is. It worked for me. Go do this with no ask in return. And I think that's one of the huge benefits of the communication age that we live in, is what we're doing right now, remote because we can't be in person yet. But, as we continue to communicate and we're willing to share, and we realize we live in a land of abundance and not scarcity, meaning you can have and I can have. And the more that we share with each other, the easier life will become for all. I think that's, and learning from the experiences of those people you're talking about, the legacy entrepreneurs that didn't have what you and I have, that morning coffee at Genius Network that's followed us for a few years.
Yeah. And that was a positive thing that I learned at Genius Network. And I'm grateful for, Joe actually called me up and said, Scott, you are coming to this program, right? And I said, of course, Joe. And I did have to write a check for 10 grand, but I did go. Thanks for calling me, Joe. He's a hell of a sales guy. He goes, hey, if you're not going to go, forget it. Don't go. No, Joe. I'll go. I'll be there. Seriously, that's how it went. But he showed me the importance of coaching. He showed me the importance of networking with people like you that I didn't see. And maybe other people got something else out of Genius Network, but that hit home for me. And that we need to communicate. We need to be open. We do. Obviously, we have internet and people can communicate, but people can communicate blah, 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 because they're great and they're this and that, whatever. But when you're really grateful and honest and sincere and want to help and want to communicate like you and I, there's no strategy. There's no sales pitch. I'm not selling you anything. You're not selling me anything. I just want to help.
Yeah, me too. It's what do you call it? It's something you're just compelled to do. It just feels right. When you meet somebody good, you want to, when I take a bite of something delicious, I always want my wife to try it, or anybody at my table. Like, here, man, you got to try this dessert. You got to try this thing. I don't think it's any different than that natural inclination to say, wow, this really worked for me, like you did with Coach, or when we talk about our issues either on Facebook or on a call. Like, if I have a solution to anybody's problem, I'm happy to share it freely. And there's no such thing as competition in my world, in my personal world, right?
Yeah, I had a mentor who used to tell me our only competition is ourselves. Our only competition is ourselves. I'm like, wow, that's great. Hey, by the way, what's your favorite coffee mug? Everybody has a favorite coffee mug. And when I started 3 o'clock coffee, going around talking to people, another thing I have a common denominator that everybody has their personal coffee mug. Now, I'm just going to guess. I don't know. But Bill, do you have a favorite coffee mug?
I do have a favorite coffee mug. It was a gift from my wife.
I knew it.
Everybody, I guess you're right.
I knew it. I knew it.
My wife got me a coffee mug many years ago. I still have it to this day. And it's a picture of like a 1950s housewife, and says "Little Miss Fucking Sunshine," because I'm pretty sociable in the morning, if you get what I'm meaning.
So every morning when you get up, you grab your coffee, you get that mug, and you probably chuckle and have a smile, right?
That's right. Yep, it gives me a little chuckle, and it reminds me maybe not to be Little Miss Fucking Sunshine in the morning.
So your wife is brilliant. I haven't met her, but I love her already, because whatever it takes, if that's what it takes to get a smile and say, you know what? I have a good cup of coffee in my favorite mug.
That's exactly right.
I love it. I listen back to the other podcast. I had some amazing stories about some other bugs, but I find that really fascinating. I really do.
I love hearing some of your stories on where these mugs have come from and the origins behind them, and it is important, I think, to start your day off with a nice chuckle or a sentimental memory. So I think that's why everybody has a coffee mug. I'm interested to see how many other stories you can generate from this podcast.
I don't know. Maybe it'll be my next book. Who knows, right?
Like a Kramer coffee table book from Seinfeld.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's how I got this whole coffee. 3 o'clock coffee. It was like a Seinfeld episode. What are you talking about? No, not me. Come on, Jerry. Let's go for coffee. Are you buying? I bought yesterday. That's my Seinfeld imitation right there. Everybody says, Scott, you sound like Seinfeld. Talk to me about business. What's the one thing that if you got 1 million people listening to you right now, you're on stage, 1 million people, what's the one thing you would tell them?
I would always say value over profit. Regardless of what your business is, if you focus on providing value over making a profit, the profit will follow. First, focus on providing value, and the profit will always follow.
So for a money guy, don't focus on the money. Focus on the value.
That's right. For one of a nail, if you want to look that up, it's entirely too long to use in this podcast, but for one of a nail. And that's how I built my business. It's a referral only business. It's 8 figures, and we focus predominantly on providing value, and the profits follow.
It's so true. But even in my early days, my dad would always say, Scott, whenever I needed money, I need a new pair of shoes or a haircut, I need that extra $25. The phone would ring. And there it was, my $25, And I'm like, well, it's a little changed a little bit today, Dad, but I get the point. I appreciate it. But it's true. It's so true. It's so true. I was looking, we both follow each other on Facebook ever since we met. And, when you look at your Facebook page, and I'm just, people project, I'm going to just pause for 1 second here. Let me let the puppy out 1 second.
No worries.
We will obviously have to edit that out. No, you're good. So we've been friends on Facebook since the day we met. I don't go on Facebook that often looking at other people's stuff, and if I do post something, it's something to be positive or inspiring of some words. That's just me. That's what I do. But I happen to be, snooping on your page, and we talk about what people only post what they want other people to see, to project that they're somebody they're not in some cases. You're completely the opposite. When you look at your Facebook page, you would think that you were just released from a penitentiary. You would think that you were like on the motorcycle gangster gang. You would have no idea the success and the size of your company by looking at your Facebook page.
I appreciate
and the photos of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love that. I
come from humble beginnings. My father was, my father's still a biker. We ride in the same motorcycle club. I've fought for motorcycle rights in my spare time for the last 6 or 7 years. We've gotten laws passed to benefit motorcyclists, and I don't like to flaunt success. And I think that the most successful people I've met are more about the connection than the trappings, and the trappings aren't what make anybody, in my opinion. It's what can you give to the world, and a picture of somebody leaning on a Ferrari. If that's what makes them happy, then that's what makes them happy. But if I look at social media the same way if we were hanging out at a bar. What would I say to you? What would I say to friends? What would I comment on? I mean, if we're hanging out on the beach, I'm not showing you pictures of my new Ferrari. We're talking about life. We're sharing ideas, and we're riffing on things that matter. So I post things that happen in my life that are positive, that have a benefit to somebody besides myself, whether it's pictures of my kids or stories like that. But yeah, I think between the scars and the and the motorcycle, I do probably look like I just got out of the penitentiary.
No, it's just more of a visual for the people listening. But you're genuine. Like, you are who you are. And you're not, like a lot of politicians, right? The politicians will act and say one thing, but when they go home, they're completely somebody else.
Yep.
There's that beep. And you're just real.
I think everybody's, happiness isn't a destination. It's just a state of being. So you're either happy with who you are and everything else just amplifies it, or you're in a constant pursuit that you'll never reach. It's not attainable. So I found a way that I'm happy in being, and despite success, I try to stay the same because it's where I'm happy.
Do you feel like it's success, for you, for me, for somebody else is different for everybody, right? But for you in your world, do you find success more accessible for you because you don't have other things bringing you down that takes up your brain power? Like, what is other people going to think? Oh, what about this? What about that? That just suck up energy out of your mind. And you now have more mind power to do more good things to produce more. Would you agree?
I would agree. Absolutely. I mean, nobody's Steve Jobs, but when I heard stories about people removing decision fatigue from their life, be it Steve Jobs wearing a black turtleneck and jeans every day, or another successful entrepreneur eating the exact same meals every single day, the less you think about, the less you worry about, the less you have to consider, the more time that you have, the more mental energy that you have to spend on the things that you love. For me, it's my wife and kids and my loved ones. So, by delegating my schedule, by delegating my books, by delegating pretty much everything and putting things out of my mind and just being happy with who I am and not worrying about what people think about me, then yeah, when I'm present for my family, which is what's important to me, then I'm truly present because I'm not distracted by anything insignificant.
Yeah, I recently I came up with my own terminology. Somebody else probably said it. Some probably already tried to teach me this, but I call it living in the now. Living in the now. Like right now, I'm with you. I'm living in the now. You might have heard some beeps and emails in the background, but I'm not checking them. I got my earphones on. You and I, we're in a cafe, but we're also looking at each other over a virtual monitor here. But being in the now and not thinking about anything else is so important. And so many people get distracted on this and this and this. And they never accomplish anything. They go home and go, what did I do today? I don't know what I did.
Yeah. If you're an avid reader, I'm sure you've read it or at least come across it, but the best introduction to that concept for me was a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called The Miracle of Mindfulness.
Yeah, great book.
I won't belabor the audience with the story, but in essence, if you're sitting down eating a tangerine and you're not focused at all on the taste or the flavor, but you're just talking and talking about the future and everything else, if you can't eat a single slice of a tangerine, you'll never be able to eat a whole tangerine. But if you just focus on what you're doing right now, and you, like you said, live in the now, then you can truly live.
Yeah.
It's a huge concept for me.
I just learned it. I just learned it. I'm not going to say that. I physically just learned it, and it was an aha moment. And I get living in the present and a little bit of buzzwords, but living in the now for me seems so. It was like my word of the year last year, I think, was the vibe. That's the vibe that I feel, right?
Yeah.
The vibe I feel with people I know, or when I meet you, it's just the vibe. And now it's the now. Living in the now.
That's awesome. That's like a transcendent moment, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing that you've come to that. I mean, colors will be more brighter, I think.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to start figuring this out because a lot of people lost their business during the pandemic of 2020 and 2021, but they're okay. They're like what you said. I mean, you've been through some tragedies, but you're okay. Yeah.
As long as you're taking in breath, you're okay and you'll survive.
We're taking in air. We're taking in breath. We're okay. And we've all went so fast, that a lot of people are now saying, what am I doing? Why am I moving so fast? Let me just enjoy now. Why worry about next month or next quarter or next year? I mean, we all have to plan ahead. Don't get me wrong. But psychologically, enjoying your moment of your life, it could change again. We could have the coronavirus 2022. Who knows? I don't know. You don't know. We don't know.
Yep.
So you can plan, and I'm all for planning. I got 2 25-year plans, like Dan Sullivan says. I stick to it, and I believe in it. But you got to live in it now in order for you to get to the 25-year plan. You just drive yourself crazy.
You can drive yourself crazy. It's the same concept I heard Dean Jackson talk about. And I mean, you should invite him on as to have this one conversation.
We were at the same table at Genius Network, by the way.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Dean
Oh,
had a
yeah,
great
he's
way
great.
with.
Yeah. He's
He
awesome.
said every entrepreneur we meet always says or starts out at least, maybe not now, but they start out at least saying, "I'll be successful when." And if you have that list in your head, then what's stopping you from living that way now? If success to you is being able to take a nap in the afternoon, or if success to you is being able to be home every night for dinner with your family, then what's stopping you from doing that now? Because tomorrow's not promised, and you need to make time for that. And that's what puts gas back in your tank. And a car on E, as we've learned on the East Coast here recently, with the pipeline doesn't go anywhere. So if you're waiting, if there's some measure of success, or you say I'll be successful when, there's no reason to start. There's no reason not to start that today.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you remember one of the programs for the listeners. In our coaching program, every quarter we have a different concept. And one of the concepts was hero. The subject was around how to be a hero, right? Who are you going to be a hero to? And of course, we are on a virtual cafe, but I see your office, and I can't help but notice Superman on the shelf behind you. Is Superman your hero? Like what Dan Sullivan was trying to coach us on? Talk to me about Superman.
That's well, that particular Superman, because you already mentioned Seinfeld, is the same Superman same Superman model that was in most episodes of Seinfeld, and it's both a nod to like-minded individuals on Zoom that understand what that exactly is. Like, hey, that's from Seinfeld. But it also reminds me to always be a kid, and that sometimes you have responsibility. So it does a few things, but yeah, that's also try to be a hero every single day.
Well, what's your kryptonite then?
My kryptonite is I try to do too much, so I don't have. And you'll like this. I always have to remind myself to be focused.
Be focused. Kind of a book that's coming out really soon. And by the way, thank you for the pre-order on that. I saw your name on the list. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Be focused.
It's my pleasure. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, some good stuff. We just added some more material to it. Another podcast, but some news came out in National Geographic today. Matter of fact, this is unplanned for, but I will read it. Today in the news in National Geographic, they have a whole article about Angelique Jolene, who is promoted women to be beekeepers, and how much the bees are important to the food and agriculture of the World Organization. And they have amazing photographs of some bees. Of course, it's National Geographic. That is in today's news. Angelique Jolene embraces bees and female beekeepers as the environmental's guardians. I mean, really cool photo. It's Angelique with all these honeybees all over her body. It's a really cool photo, by the way. But unplanned for, but we're seeing more and more about save the world, be a beekeeper. We need bees in the world. So that's pretty cool.
That is very cool. Well timed too, since your book should be out relatively soon, right?
Very soon. Maybe I'm looking at a July 1st launch. So, hey, Bill, I just want to say thanks for meeting me for coffee.
Thanks for inviting me for coffee, Scott. I'll never turn down an invitation for 3 o'clock coffee.
And next time, Bill, can you actually bring your favorite coffee mug with you so that you can share this mug with me and I can kind of maybe take a photo of it and share it with other people?
I'd be happy to. I'll bring it with me everywhere I go.
Thanks, Bill. Bill, you are an amazing individual. You inspired me from day one. And what inspired me more was seeing you on Facebook, being you. So thanks for that. I learned something for that. Just be you.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, right on.
I appreciate that. We're definitely kindred spirits in that way. You were always very open with me from day one, and I'm happy that I can reciprocate.
Yeah, maybe it's, maybe someday you'll, I know you're not living in Boston today, but come on down to Boston. We'll grab a beer together. We'll go down to the Packy, get a 6-pack. What do you say? Maybe go down to the North End.
Yeah, I'd love to go to the North End. Be a wicked good time.
That was a true Boston. It'd be a wicked good time. That was truly a exaggerated Boston accent to me, not to everybody else, but to me, that was my exaggerated Boston accent. And everybody loves a little fun, a little accent. And I think that's why we do so well in life. We just have fun. We're a kid, like you said.
Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive.
There you go. Thanks, Bill. Hey, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Likewise, Scott. Thank you, sir.
Do you have a great story you would like to share with the world? If so, go to 3o'clockcoffee.com and sign up today to be on our show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and tell a friend about the 3 O'Clock Coffee Podcast.